Thank you so much. I want to have Howard Dean as my warm-up act every time from now on. It's really great to be here. My God, what a difference a year makes. Do you remember a year ago, we were all gathered here together and we had one goal and one goal only, to get George Bush out of the White House. Well, this is still a goal, but now we have a different goal as well. And this is to make it clear that next time, at the next election, there is a clear progressive agenda, both on the domestic front and on the foreign policy front. And that's what I want to talk to you about here. Because in this room and around the country, progressives have an incredible responsibility to make sure that we answer in the right way the greatest unsolved mystery left in Washington now that we know who Deep Throat is. And the greatest unsolved mystery is, what exactly does the Democratic Party stand for? So let us start with the domestic front. I'm standing here a little bit like Claire Booth Luce. You know, she was a convert to Catholicism. And she went to meet with the Pope and started telling him what a great religion Catholicism was. And the Pope interrupted her and said, "Madam Booth Luce, you forget, I'm already a Catholic." So I'm going to stand here and tell you very quickly what you already know. You know, for example, that Tom DeLay needs to go, right? He needs to go back to Sugarland to kill some more bugs. You know that this immoral Congress has actually managed to run up a jaw-dropping debt of $4.3 trillion, that our trade balance in the last quarter of 2004 alone was over $160 billion. And these people really must believe in the rapture. They really must believe that the end is near. Because I cannot otherwise explain why they are so fiscally irresponsible without any concern about the future, both when it comes to the debt and the deficit and when it comes to our most short-sighted energy policy that truly completely ignores what we are reading every day about oil supplies around the world drying up, about our continuing dependence on foreign oil, despite the fact that that makes us dependent on countries that do not wish us well. That's the lack of leadership in this United States Congress and in this White House. But also, let us look around at the most immoral act of this immoral Congress, and this is the passage of the bankruptcy bill. Of the 1.6 million bankruptcies last year, more than half were because of healthcare problems. And yet here we are, we have abandoned ordinary Americans as they are trying to rebuild their lives. And here is the most tragic fact. 73 Democrats in the House and 18 Democrats in the Senate voted for the bankruptcy bill. And make sure they know you are booing. Because you know what? Very appropriately and very legitimately, leading up to the 2004 election, we all held our tongues until sometimes they bled, right? We did not say everything we were feeling about what was going on and about the agenda. Well, right now there is no excuse. Before the next election, we need to make it clear what this party stands for, and it does not stand for the bankruptcy bill. And it does not stand for a Medicare prescription drug benefit that does not give us the right to get the kind of bulk purchasing agreements that would reduce prices because the drug industry would not allow it. When is the Democratic Party going to stop trying to please Wall Street and Big Pharma? Republicans claim they are for the culture of life, right? Well, look at what's happening with the drug industry. 55,000 people supposedly died because of taking Vioxx, which Merck knew was going to lead to these disastrous side effects, and yet they kept advertising it. That's promoting the culture of death, not the culture of life. And if the Democratic Party is truly going to take on moral values, please stop triangulating on gay marriage and trying to find the perfect way to talk about abortion, and find the way to turn economic issues into moral issues, because they are moral issues. And everybody was obsessing about the gay marriage initiatives that passed in 11 states. Well, what about the minimum wage initiatives that also passed in 2 red states? 2 states, Nevada and Florida, that got George Bush elected, also voted for big hikes in the minimum wage, because you know what? The American people understand that it is not moral to work hard and not be able to lift your family out of poverty. They understand that. We do have the numbers on our side. 35 million people living in poverty, 45 million people without health insurance, over 1 million jobs less. But what happened is that somehow we've lost the music. And the progressives gathered here have the tremendous job of trying to put the soul back into the democratic agenda. And now let me move to foreign policy. And I have the perfect bridge, because last night at that wonderful dinner, Richard Parker, in presenting the award to John Kenneth Galbraith, read from a letter that Galbraith had sent in 1961 to John F. Kennedy. And Galbraith wrote in 61, "The right will always criticize reasonableness as softness. When they speak of total victory, they invite total annihilation. They aren't brave, but suicidal. There is a curious superficial pugnacity about the American people, which I'm persuaded does not go very deep. They applaud the noisy man, but they reconsider if they think him dangerous. We must make it clear that these men are dangerous. And the Democratic leaders need to make it clear that these men running our foreign policy are dangerous." And if there is one hope I have about this conference, is that we are not going to leave the Washington Hilton without being clear about one thing. We cannot continue to ignore the debacle going on in Iraq and have any hope of ever again becoming a majority party. I want you to really hear me on that. There is absolutely no way that Democratic leaders can stop talking about Iraq and hope that they can win in 2006 and 2008 by talking about Social Security, pensions, and child care expansion. There is no way at a time of war. And trust me, the Republicans are going to make absolutely clear that we remain at a time of war for many, many years to come. And there is no way that at a time of war you can be a majority party without having a clear foreign policy position that is not Me Too Republicanism. We cannot allow Dick Cheney to go on Larry King, as he did on Monday, and say that the insurgency in Iraq is in its death throes, because this is a direct lie. And unfortunately, the mainstream media are putting the key stories on page 8 today of the New York Times that 15 more Iraqis died in a suicide bomb. It is now page 8. It is no longer page 1 because it happens practically every day. The insurgency is not in its death throes. We are continuing to lose precious lives, precious American lives, precious Iraqi lives. $300 billion of American taxpayer dollars that is not going to much needed domestic priorities. We cannot have a real solution on the domestic front without addressing what is happening in Iraq. And yet, look at Congress. Congress is supposed to provide oversight. That's what our Constitution says, right? Where is the oversight? Another appropriation, another massive appropriation was passed without any oversight. Even the modest attempt to establish a Truman-style committee, a bipartisan effort by Congressman Tierney and Congressman Leach, even that modest attempt did not go anywhere. A Truman-style committee to find out how our money is spent. Even if you're passionately in favor of the war, you should want to know how the money is spent. You should want to know what happened to the $9 billion that nobody can account for. You should want to know what's happening with the 70 investigations into possible criminal conduct about U.S. projects in Iraq. These are serious matters, and there is no oversight going on in this most corrupt, most immoral Congress that we have right now. And what's going on with Halliburton? They keep being found guilty, and they keep being given more multi-billion-dollar contracts. Isn't there something wrong with that? At the very moment when Ahmed Chalabi is the oil minister, this is like something out of Saturday Night Live. And here was the president actually sounding like his caricature on Saturday Night Live when they asked him why had nobody ever been held accountable about all the mess in Iraq. And he replied, we've had an accountability moment, and that's called the 2004 election. We have to make it very clear, Mr. President, that this was no accountability moment. The accountability moment has not happened yet. And Democrats in Congress have to hold this administration accountable about what's happening in Iraq. And let me just end by saying something which is difficult to say but must be said. I'm very, very troubled by the way our Democratic leaders go on television and sound like spineless Republicans. And let me just say that even if you don't think that we need to take a strong stand on principle, just because it's the right thing, even if you're only thinking strategically, there is no way Democrats can win an election if they don't make it absolutely clear that these Republicans are not keeping us safer. The invasion of Iraq, as Howard Dean told Tim Russert on Meet the Press, has made this country less safe, not more safe. And do you know what Tim Russert replied? He turned to Howard Dean and said, let's go back to your rhetoric. What's that? It's like there is Howard Dean, the chairman of the Democratic Party, making an incredibly important statement that we are less safe because we invaded Iraq, and Tim Russert is telling him, let's go back to your rhetoric, your personality, your hot-headedness. Is this serious television journalism? No. And there is Hillary Clinton, I'm afraid, on Inside Politics. I could not believe it. But here it is, in black and white. She's asked by Judy Woodruff, what is her exit strategy about Iraq? And she replies, you know, I'm not one who feels comfortable setting exit strategies. We don't know what we are exiting from. We don't know what the situation is moving towards. How do we know where we are headed when we don't know where we are? Excuse me? This is very existential sounding. But with the greatest respect to Senator Clinton, if you're not comfortable setting an exit strategy, please point out somebody who is, because our American soldiers are dying every day waiting for someone to set an exit strategy. And let me just end by saying that I do have a litmus test for 2008. I want a Democratic presidential candidate who can give a straight, unambiguous answer on Iraq. And for the bloggers in the room, we have a big job ahead of us, because I know the bloggers and I know we at the Huffington Post are determined to keep Iraq on the front burner. So any pictures that the mainstream media are not going to run, we will run. Send them to me. Any video the mainstream media is not going to run, we will run. We will keep the stories about the debacle in Iraq on our homepage, not on page 8, as the New York Times is doing. And we will stay on it 24/7 until the coverage penetrates through the lies and the equivocations of the mainstream media, of the Republican Congress, of this White House, and of any spineless leaders on our side of the aisle. And let me just say, absolutely, let's take on Republicans on Social Security and the nuclear option and the corruption of Congress and Tom DeLay and pensions, but let's also take them on their phony claim that they're the only ones who can keep this country safe, because they are not. And this is the only way to take back the White House, to take back Congress, and to take back America. Thank you.